Let's talk about seam finishes. So woven fabrics have an annoying tendency to fray once you cut that edge, and if it frays too much, eventually it can fray through your entire seam allowance and cause a hole in your garment. So a significant part of sewing is figuring out how to stop this fraying from happening. And we're going to go over a few ways of how to do that. Now, one way is having all of the raw edges on the inside of something so none of them are exposed and they don't get rubbed against and none of the fraying happens because there's no friction happening. Which is what happens when you have bags or clothes with a lining on the inside. They're sewn wrong sides together so all of the right sides are poking out and there are no raw edges anywhere. Another way you could do it is by overcasting your raw edges, which essentially means you have threads going over the edge of your fabric to protect that edge from any friction and fraying that might happen. Overcasting can be done on a serger, but it can also be done on a sewing machine. On a sewing machine, you could just use a zigzag stitch, but some sewing machines have specific stitches designed to go over the edge of fabric to protect it. If I'm going to use the zigzag stitch, I have to make sure to turn my stitch width up to the widest it can go and turn my stitch length down to somewhere between 1.5 to 1 so that there are more stitches going over the edge to protect my fabric. From there, my needle should go side to side, and if I put my needle down in the right position, I can butt the edge of my fabric right up against that needle before I put my presser foot down, and then that way I know I will be sewing over the edge of my fabric, and I just have to keep it straight from there. Now up here you see my zigzag stitches go over the edge of my fabric and help prevent any more fraying because when I push at it, the thread is protecting that raw edge, and same thing with these overcast stitches, it helps protect the raw edge when I pick at it. Now, fabric frays along the straight of grain because those are the threads that can come off, and along the cross grain, these are the threads that can come off, but theoretically it shouldn't fray along the bias, or at least it shouldn't fray much along the bias, because the bias has no threads there that can come off. Threads are only side to side and up and down. There are no diagonal threads. Therefore, when you cut on a diagonal, aka a bias, theoretically it shouldn't fray very much because of that. You can see this fabric still frays a teensy tiny bit, but it shouldn't get much worse than this. And that is the idea behind pinking shears. By cutting everything on a zigzag, it makes every piece on a bias, so theoretically it stops the fraying. Unfortunately, a lot of fabrics today are so loosely woven that even if that were true, even if I cut this on a bias, it would still fray quite a bit. I might be able to get away with it on a tightly woven fabric that already just doesn't fray very much, but do not try this on satin or brocade. Come back for part 2, and I'd really appreciate it if you bought me a coffee.